Guess who's in the studio after 5 weeks? Yep, it's Jamie. We're so excited to find out what his results are. Hi everyone, my name is Chris Martin. Welcome to Keto with me. Before we get to the answer to the question that everyone wants, let me properly introduce Jamie again. Jamie, it's nice to see you again.
Oh yeah, it's great to be back. Excited to share some of the things that I've learned over the last couple of weeks.
Does it seem like a long 5 weeks? Or...
No, honestly it went by real quickly. I went on vacation. I've been out of town for business on 2 different occasions, so it went really fast.
Wow. All right, well, we're all excited, and so we're going to get to it right now. Everybody wants to know what Jamie's weight loss is. You want to tell them how much you've lost in, now just do the 5 weeks that we've been together, and then we'll talk about the time you did before that.
Yeah, so I'm at, almost 19 pounds that I've lost.
I have you tacked at 21.6.
Is it 21.6?
I had to look at the screen there, folks, because I have his spreadsheet of hope, is what we're calling it. No, I have his spreadsheet open on the the computer that's right in front of us that you don't see, but I have him at 21.6 pounds lost in 5 weeks since we've been together. Now, if you remember from his week 0 video that we did together, he actually started, doing it, rough, just a real rough, low carb, stuff, 2 weeks prior to that. So he started at 327 something. So that would put you, more like almost 31 pounds. So that just goes to show you that, just cutting out those carbs, makes a significant difference. So congratulations on your weight loss. We have a lot more to talk about, like, all the other great things that you've experienced along the way. All right, folks, let me give you an idea of how this video is going to, play out, because there's a lot to talk about. So I wanted to organize it in a way that, kind of made sense for everybody. We're going to start first by asking Jamie, to explain generally how he's doing and stuff. And I got some questions in there for him, and we're just going to see just overall. We're going to cover his milestones that he's achieved, and then ones that I know that he's achieved. And then, maybe there's some other ones that just, we didn't realize that, I didn't realize. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to do a week by week, discussion. So I'm glancing at my little cheat sheet here. Because there was conversations that Jamie and I had along the way, and and things that just kind of sparked some things, and so it's good to just kind of talk about how the weeks played out. Also, we're going to do a teachable moments segment where I'm going to have like some things that I want to go over specifically with Jamie, to make sure he's set up for the next part of his journey, and then we're going to finish up with what's next for Jamie. What's his week 6 goals? What's beyond all of that? And included in that area there is also about some milestones that he's still looking forward to. All right, so we're going to start out. I want to know, this is kind of very high level. I want to know generally, how do you feel like right now? It's 5 weeks, 7 if you count the time beforehand, but how do you feel now versus before?
I'm really starting to feel to feel good. I feel like I've got a little more energy level. When I get up in the morning, it's not snooze the alarm clock 2, 3, 4 times. It's just kind of pop up because I want to go take my take my readings. I want to get on the scale and see what happened, and it's kind of been the excitement of just jumping up and wanting to get into what my results were from the day before.
Right. So, all right, you said that you get up, you have a little bit more energy, right? Mm-hmm. Do you consider that a lot more energy than previously, or do you feel like you're trending in the right direction, or both? I
feel like I'm trending in the right direction. It was just not dragging, not feeling like I just laid down. I feel like I got a good night's sleep, and I'm up and ready to tackle the day. And then even in the evening when I come home from work, to sit down and, eat some dinner, and then maybe sit down and watch a little bit of TV with the family. A lot of times I'd fall asleep on the couch, and my wife would wake me up and ask me if I was going to bed or sleeping on the couch.
So now you're like physically staying up longer and actually going to bed instead of being like, are you going to bed kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you feeling, when you eat, are you having any kind of like afterwards, or is it starting to be like you're not tanking after?
No, that's kind of been the nice part about eating is when I'm eating, I'm just, it's not that groggy, like, oh, I'm just, ready to go into that, food coma to where I'm gonna fall asleep. I'm actually eating to sustain now. It's not eating to overindulge and sit down and just eat and eat and eat.
Right.
I'm actually kind of trying to plan what I am gonna eat, and then trying to, cut those portions down to make it a more comfortable meal, as opposed to having that afterwards, like, oh God, why did I eat that much?
Were you surprised in the pre-discussion that we had prior to sitting down here that I said, I don't need you to worry about your portion controls, that, you can eat, I still want you to kind of eat as much as you want, but obviously you're not wanting to gorge yourself because you're like starting to get full now. The reason is that we're going to be talking in our later discussion, we're going to have a little discussion about, trying to augment his macros, some to get them to be where we need them to be. But that's part of the teachable moment segment. Do you feel like, do you feel successful? Like this is something you could sustain and keep doing too?
No, this is, like I said, no, the feeling of eating like this, like I said, in past diets, it was always, I was on a diet, and that's all you thought about all day long was, oh my God, I'm hungry. I wish I could just get something.
The restriction.
Whereas with this, when it comes time to mealtime, I'm not in that famished,
right?
I'm not in that feeling of, I could grab and eat my arm. It was
right.
It was more, it's just time to eat, and you go ahead and eat, because what I am eating is, eating a little smarter is, you're sustaining yourself throughout the day and not getting to those lows to where you're just ready to plow into some food.
So what's exciting for me when I hear this, right, is because, and I'll just kind of say it how it is, you are not really 100% keto right now. You are, if I were to classify like your eating style right now, I would classify it as low carb, right? Mm-hmm. So low carb is like, you've restricted it like the diets of Atkins and so forth in the past, and you're doing some level of the additional things you would normally do in keto, which we're going to talk about, like the fasting, and I notice some of your macros are falling into the right area, but they're not perfect yet. So what's really exciting is that, what we're going to do is we're going to dial all that in, and you're going to do like true keto. And I think what's going to happen is you're just going to be like, there's more. It's like the part of the commercial where they're like, but wait, there's more. This is exactly it, because looking at the trials and tribulations we had in the 5 weeks, working together on this, you were able to be this successful. So just imagine how successful you're going to be when you actually start dialing it in and actually doing like what I would call real keto, because it happens a lot with folks. They jump in, they do low carb, they have no problem with that. I shouldn't say don't have any problem with it, but people do. But they do the low carb part, but they forget the high fat. We're going to be dialing that in, here. So I think this is just, fantastic, just to hear generally overall you're feeling great. And I'm sure he's going to drop some more tidbits as we go through this week by week, and his future stuff. You'll get to hear more things that happened, that were aha moments, or what I call, so the little things, moments where it's just like, I can't believe I was able to do that. Let's go ahead and talk about Jamie's milestones. We have a little pre-discussion before we do each one of these segments, but what milestones did you achieve over the last 5 weeks? And don't hesitate to include the littlest thing, because what might be insignificant to me, is huge for you. So
I guess the most exciting, milestone for me was I've finally dropped below 300 pounds again. So I was really excited about that. And then the other thing that I've noticed is my glucose levels are starting to trend back down towards the normal range.
Which when I saw, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, guys, but I was just floored with that. I was like, what did he make a typo here? We'll talk about that.
So no, that was really exciting for me. And then, the idea that I was able to go out of the country to an all-inclusive resort And actually during that week, I was able to come out of there a flush. I didn't gain, I didn't lose, but there were a lot of different temptations and different things going on.
I couldn't even imagine like an all-inclusive. Wow.
And there was even, while eating over there, there was the evening where, it was kind of a learning moment. They had like a buffet style dinner, and we had, spaghettis and different things like that all sitting out there. And I just thought, oh man, what do I eat? What do I eat? And then it was, looked at the lasagna and then saw the ricotta cheese was in the lasagna and made the choice to peel all the toppings out of the lasagna, kind of like, peeling everything off the top of a pizza. And that was a really good, it was like a treat, a nice dinner, and it didn't completely blow me out of the water.
Right. Was there anything else like traveling with work?
Yeah. So then, after I got back from vacation, I was home for a week, and then I then went away for another 3-day work trip, and I was actually able to lose a little bit of weight on this work trip. And as I was out of town for work, again, it was very structured. They brought in breakfast for us. They brought in lunch, and then we all went as a group out to dinner. And so I was able to actually make things work, and actually lost a little bit of weight while out of town on this one. It's always a lot easier to structure your meals and everything that you're eating while at home, whereas you're kind of going on the fly when you're away, because you're at the discretion of what the group is doing and what's been provided. Right.
Yeah, and I can see it all, because all this, the whole reason we track folks is because, it tells us verifiably what his body is doing, So, I could see, week 1, pretty good. Week 2 and 3, okay, but he didn't lose. I mean, he didn't gain. He lost, and then he stayed. And then week 4, when you were actually home for the whole week, wow, things were just amazing. And then week 5, you did good, but you didn't do amazing like the previous week, and that's okay. And like you said, you learned a ton, and we're going to talk about the week by week here in a moment. And I think there was one other thing you really excited you recently. I would consider a milestone. What was it?
Yeah, so I was able to dig through my shorts from my past, and I was actually able to pull out a pair of shorts that was of a smaller size and actually get them buttoned up, and they weren't so tight that it was uncomfortable to wear them. I was able to actually pull out a smaller pair of pants, as I've noticed my shorts from last season and what I was wearing early in this season are now getting to the point where I've really got to strap them in with a belt, because they're starting to fall down.
Nice. Yeah, you don't have to run and buy a new pair of shorts. You can start to reutilize. Everyone, all of us, I don't care who you are, if you're heavy, you've got multiple pairs of shorts from Christmas past or whatever you want to call it, glucose past. You've got shirts, I mean, you've seen my donation videos. It's just insane, how many clothes we hold on to, because we're like, we spent good money on that. I'll lose it again. I'll get back into it. And that's what he's done. And I call that the little things, because it's these little things that make it so much, more of even a milestone for yourself than anyone else. Everyone else out here, and nothing wrong, folks, but you guys are like, what's the weight? What's the weight? What's the weight? For Jamie, it's like, I did this. I put on these shorts. I broke 300. He's got all these, really, really, really big things. So now we're going to talk about Jamie's week by week, and I'm not going to get into excruciating. I'm going to try not to get some excruciating detail on this, because there's a lot of good information in the data. We got the spreadsheet up here on the screen, just tucked below here, so you guys can't see it, but. I want to give you my perspective of the 5 weeks, and then kind of, play back and forth on some of the discussions that Jamie and I had that helped make him, like what he ran into, because, right, I'm supposed to be your mentor. So how are you actually mentoring? Well, first of all, I'm not up his butt. He'll tell you that, that we days don't even talk. We might have a text or two back and forth here and there. And, what I do is I log in every morning when I'm doing my number stuff, and I check his numbers. And once in a while, something will spark my, hey, what the hell, Jamie? Or Jamie will send me a message and say, hey, I'm kind of doing this, and I don't really know how to do this, or something like that. And that's kind of what the whole mentorship, fellowship type of thing is supposed to work, right? So, all right, let's go through his weeks here. So, we'll kind of summarize a little bit. Weeks 1, 2, and 3, he had only one goal, just one goal. 60 carbs or less. That's all he had to care about. We didn't care about macros, high fat. We didn't care about fasting. We didn't care about clean versus dirty. We didn't, and don't ever count calories, or I'll have to beat him with the stick. All we cared about was those first 3 weeks is 60 carbs or less. So it started out as, he did really good in week 1. I mean, he had a very successful week 1, I think almost 9 pounds of weight loss, which was phenomenal. Again, after already losing about 8 or 9 pounds on his own, the 2 weeks prior to that, I started seeing, pretty, same kind of glucose numbers, and we'll talk about why glucose is important here shortly in the teachable moments. But, we saw, I didn't see like a whole drastic lot of movement on the glucose during that first week. We saw, weight. That was the drastic movement. We also saw that, you were successful at tracking. Now, I think I did reach out to my brother and say, hey, when you see Jamie at the dive shop, can you just kind of quickly show him which macro percents I want entered? I wasn't concerned about macros. I want these numbers from the get-go because it shows a trend. And I think, and then back and forth, we had a few conversations and so forth. And I think it was maybe at the end of week 1 going into week 2, I was like expecting to see a little bit more. And I just kind of, posed a question to Jamie, is like, what is it is there anything else you're eating or drinking that I'm not aware of? Because I would expect to see some better numbers. I wasn't mad or anything like that, but and that's when you indicated, do you remember what you indicated?
Yeah, that's it. I was drinking the Circle all day long.
So he has this little seltzer type machine, and it comes with flavors, and that flavoring some, even sugar substitutes and stuff like that. Well, it wasn't the fact that he was drinking it was when he was drinking it. So if he was basically drinking all day long, and this is, I think, even in one of the update videos, that if you drink all day long, your insulin, bam, 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 because right now, inside his body, insulin is king. 100% guaranteed, just like it was in mine. Insulin dominates. When you have insulin all the time, you're never going to lose weight. You're never going to release fat. This is in all the Dr. Boz videos just about that you watch where she talks about insulin. She'll explain this, to your heart's content. So when he said that, I was like, oh no, don't do that. And I think you went the extreme version of it, because I said, no, you can have it. Just eat it. Just have it with your meals. That way the insulin has time to taper off, and you have these opportunities for weight loss in between. I think you went like kind of cold turkey, and I said, again, I kind of said 4 times, like, no, don't worry, you can do it. Just don't do it during that. So that was kind of one of our first teachable moments, I think, that we had. Mm-hmm. That was probably significant, because after that I started to see, much better, numbers, and so forth. I'm trying to think of some other things that happened in week 1 and 2 that was probably significant, other than just like, hey, make sure you're tracking. Probably for you is week 1 and 2 was getting used to the whole chronometer logging, and
that was a little different. That was a lot different. Just trying to figure out what foods were what.
Yeah, I hated it. Yeah, you asked that too. That's right. You had asked at some point, how do I log some of these things? And I'm like, yeah, sometimes it's easier not to even go just like look for nutrition information from like Wendy's or whoever the heck you're getting whatever your food from. And I know Wendy's is a bad example, but my point is that, a lot of these places have very well documented nutrition. But when you're trying to put something together, like a burger at a restaurant, I told you, do you remember what I told you?
Yeah,
break it all the way down to the smallest pieces. Yeah. Like if you see a slice of tomato, just look for it in the chronometer app, slice of tomato. It looks about like an ounce of lettuce, Don't try to look for the burger, because the burger is, even if they give you one at like a restaurant, it's going to be all of it.
Yeah.
And you told me this. Yeah, bun included.
Yeah, all of them were bun included.
Bun included. How do you get that? Well, I was like, yeah, just break it down. And after a while, you get really good at it. And now it doesn't faze me, and I'm sure he's getting to the point where he doesn't even faze him. He just does it. You know, so that was one of the other things I felt like, you know, was, you know, something that was, you know, in that particular time period. Looking at his, you know, his spreadsheet, which I'm, you know, I have to look down here, folks, to do it. I can already see in week 2 some numbers trending down. Now, what happened in week 2 is Jamie went off the grid for all intents and purposes, but he was out, you know, certifying divers and all that. So kind of like what happened was with your numbers is you just kind of died off, and the only thing you really gave me was weight, which I was thankful for, and I think you're some blood glucose here and there. Again, maintained his weight. Actually, I think you had a minus 1.6 that you had kind of earned right at the beginning of the week, and you know, you were able to keep that and maintain it. And I think even when you came back from that vacation, you had just kind of, you know, retained water from the flight and all that, because I talked you off the ledge, if you remember. You were like, 312, what the?
Yeah.
I was 307, why am I? And I said, no, give it a day. You know, depending on how you travel and, you know, maybe what was the last couple meals you had and all this other stuff and the types of food you have. It could just be water weight again that just crept back on.
And then I had a big weight loss right
boom,
after
like,
that.
Right after, and it just, you just have to, you know, hang in there. So for me, weeks 1 to 3, less than 60, you know, there was only, you know, one giant number that I could see. And then if you remember from the previous discussion in the segment here, Jamie had mentioned that you were, and remember folks, I had a spy down there. My brother was down there with him. So, you know, my brother was like, he is not off the rails. He's actually, everything he eats, he's thinking about, you know, making sure the carbs are down, and that's that and another. And if you're at an all-inclusive and you're successful, that to me is a milestone, and that's why you mentioned it. So any comment on those first 3 weeks? Like, you know, I mean, you were pretty proud of yourself, I'm sure.
Just a lot of, you know, it was a lot of learning, you know, a lot of figuring out how to track and how to look up, you know, those, like I said, the app was, I struggled with the app at first.
Daunting, right? It's because it is a little different than like some of the other apps I've used. They seem to be a little more user friendly, but once you kind of get chronometer down, it actually is super great.
Yeah.
So you had a minus 11 weight loss for that. You know, that's just with me, not including what you had before. You were getting better at tracking. You got thrown into the lion's den right off the get-go, because very few people would have like, I'm going to start this now before this type of trip. I remember distinctly, no, I want to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And making yourself go through it, you now know the challenges that you have when you're on a trip. Mm-hmm. You know, and that'll be, you know, something important to talk about in week 5 here in just a moment. So week 4 is Jamie's best week out of all the weeks. Not from necessarily, if you're doing it off weight loss, no, it's not like his best week. You know, his best week obviously is the first week, but a lot of times water will drop with that. So, I mean, arguably depending on how much water he lost the first time on his own. I mean, we usually, you know, well, let's just say this. Week 4, the reason it's the most successful is because that is the week that I saw the blood glucose numbers. And we're going to talk about that here shortly, folks, about why is it important. Move significantly. And when I say significantly, he's had numbers that everywhere between, you know, like, let me see here, 130s, you know, 120s, 1-teens, you know. And then when he came back, you remember we had this edict for you. I was like, okay, no, you're going down 20 carbs or less. Still nothing else, folks, just 20 carbs or less. That's his only goal. And boy, you did it. I mean, you did really, really, really well. I mean, your average blood glucose for that whole week was like 100. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like right 102, 103, somewhere right there. That is just huge. When I saw that, I knew we were trending in the right direction. You know, I could only imagine how you were feeling during that time period. And, you know, what I also saw was you, and you saw this in the update video, folks, that you were like, oh, I went ahead and tried it fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wouldn't have been able to do that fast, I guarantee you, if you were attacking a lot of sugar, you know, and so forth. You had your highest ketones in that week as well. He's not super high, folks. His highest so far has been 0.5, but he still has ketones. So, How'd you feel about week 4?
No, I think, like I said, week 4, I was home. I only worked one day. I only went into work one day that week. I was off the rest of the week. I was burning vacation time up.
Oh, okay.
So I still had vacation time after I got back.
Okay, I could use some of that. We'll throw some of that this way.
But no, it was a very structured week, and I was able to plot and plan everything out, and
Very good.
it was just, it felt like a successful week.
Yeah, you had some really low carb days there too, like a 5, a 12, a 13.3, and then you had a 21.9. But that's okay. I mean, you averaged really good for that week on your carbs. So, like I said, I was really impressed. And most significantly is that blood glucose, which we'll talk about very, very shortly. Week 5 was a slight brick in the face, but you handled it really well and had a pretty significant weight loss in that week 5 as well. So what happened in week 5?
So on week 5, I got sent out of town again for work, and so I was
3 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I left out. I guess I left out Tuesday evening, and then was out of town all day Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And on that trip, it was they were structured meals. It was I was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the group. So it was just a limited buffet style. You had 2 different proteins, and then of course
their idea of protein. You
Yeah.
want to tell them about the one particular dinner that
so
you
like,
had?
Yeah, so like the Wednesday evening dinner was
First day there, right?
Yeah, that was the first full day there. I had fasted for breakfast and lunch on that day, and then I got to dinner and I was sitting there at the table smelling it, and I thought, oh wow, it smells so good. And then at 6 o'clock they they said that we could line up and eat, and they opened up the things. And I looked in there, and the chicken was like to me, first impression was a chicken pot pie.
Yeah.
I was like, ugh. And then after that, was salmon, and I thought, okay, well, I guess, I can eat salmon. And I looked at the salmon, and they put barbecue sauce all over it.
This is interesting because you were there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, folks. This is me going to make a joke here. So it also has the acronyms WTF. So I'm thinking like when he got there, he was like, I fasted all this time. And then you open those 2 things up and what? Oh my God. It's like you didn't like nothing. Go ahead and tell the rest. I'm just like floored. But I'm not surprised.
No, like you said, at that point I was mad, and so I grabbed a little bit of the salad, and then even when I looked at the dressings, I thought, well, there was ranch, so I just got salad. And then I thought,
like not a big ranch fan. Ranch.
So then
I don't like ranch either. I'm sorry.
And I decided, well, I suppose the little chicken thing I could probably, I grabbed 2 of those and took it back to my table, and I thought, well, I can cut it open and eat the chicken out of it. Well, when I cut it open, it was like there was no chicken. It was like creamy sauce, and it had raisins and stuffing, and I was like, oh, that just wasn't going to work for me. So at that point, I just gave up on dinner and shoved my plate away and decided I was just going to venture out for dinner on my own.
But you had to wait,
afterwards.
didn't you? Like it wasn't just like you could leave right then. You had to wait like a while, which I would have been just sitting there going, I'm starving. Especially if you're new to fasting.
Yeah.
And again, folks, he's not fasting yet. It's not been part of any goals yet. This is him doing it. So a little frustration?
Yeah, it was. I was a little frustrated. Fortunately at my table, one of the other guys that I was actually rooming with, he was, more of a picky eater, and, he didn't care for what they had either. And so we kind of decided amongst ourselves that we were going to do an after dinner.
Because you didn't have dinner. To be truthful.
So we had a little snack of the salad, and then afterwards we took off and went and got a meal on our own.
Right, the wings and stuff like that. So that that's what you have to do, folks. Sometimes you just run into that. So, so 5 weeks, you've got like this full gamut of like challenges that not everyone would have, in that 5 weeks. A lot of us have the luxury even if we go to work during the day somewhere else, we come home. You've been gone like half the time, and then you've been put in these situations where you don't control the food at all, and then you just sometimes have to work around it. So him and I talked about some strategies for how to handle something like this in the future. Like, for example, maybe, having some pecans or macadamia nuts or something like that there, on you, just in a baggie or something, just in case you get like zero option for food, right? If not, it becomes your augment, your ability to augment your meal, so it becomes keto. And we'll get to that, here shortly. So, but for me, overall, for the first 5 weeks, again, 21.6 pounds, solid movement on the blood glucose. Not to say you haven't had your glucose go up and down a couple times. It's going to be like that because you're insulin resistant. It's going to be a while. Once we start going through some of this hardcore fasting, not hardcore, but we get into that more often, that's going to help really break that. And then at some point it will be, significantly easier. So we have that to talk about when we get to his, his goals. For me, I feel like he did everything I asked him for and more. And I'm really impressed that even just the challenges. I planned all my travel stuff, and no matter how hard you plan, there's just things that come up, and you just kind of, And what's happening in 2 weeks, or no, wait, 2 or 3 weeks?
I think it's 3. Yeah, after 3 weeks for the 4th of July, we're going to take another vacation.
He's going somewhere nice too, by the way. He's going to Hawaii for 12 days.
Yeah.
And he said him and his wife have already done what?
Now we've already talked about how we're going to plan it, kind of leaning towards the maybe one, maybe a little bit of breakfast in the morning, and more of just a dinner in the evening. Just
breakfast might be more for her, you said, right?
Yeah.
But I shouldn't get into that yet. We're going to talk about a planning teachable moment here, here shortly. But I think for your first 5 weeks, you crushed it. So I've seen him with the shirt off. I see he's thinner. If you look at his face, he looks thinner. He's got the same shorts on he wore the first time, but he's down into smaller shorts. So folks, this is moving in the right direction, by far. Okay, now we're into our teachable moment segment of the video here with Jamie. I want to talk specifically about blood glucose. You heard me mention it before. It's mentioned in a lot of keto people's videos and so forth, and why is it important? The blood glucose gives us at least a daily look at like what your blood sugar is, and the more obviously when you eat something, your insulin goes up. When you have insulin in your blood, a certain amount, your body will just store everything else that it eats as fat, right? Because it's like, I got excess. I shouldn't say it's the blood glucose number that does that. It's that if you end up with too much, glucose, that's when it'll store it. But my point about this is that if you have high blood glucose, like I did and you, but we weren't diabetic yet, we were trending towards it, right? I distinctly remember your doctor saying something to the extent of that, if you come back in when I see you next, we're going to talk about your doctor here shortly, but then I'm going to put you on insulin. And I've been kind of the same way. I was trending towards that. Insulin right now dominates in your body. That's why your numbers are still high. They're not like, perfect, but they're trending in headed to the right direction now. But, Dr. Boz has a way of saying that, insulin is king. So when insulin is king, you're not losing anything. So you have to do things to kind of beat that insulin back down until you get, to a point where you're normal again. So we do that, first of all, by tracking everything we put in our mouth, because I was reviewing like one of your blood glucose numbers and looking at like your other numbers, and I'm just like, how is it possible that he ate this, but his blood glucose kind of just went way up? And a quick text and a little back and forth, I found out you kind of did something that you didn't think about at the moment, but it ended up being pretty significant. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I had a few Long Island iced teas and didn't think about how sweet and good those really were.
So my thing back to him was like, I don't, unless it's like black coffee, which some people would argue does have fiber in it, and it does, but we don't count it. Black coffee, water, plain tea, just pretty much those guys, or variations of them that are plain, not sugar substitutes or anything like that. If you have just those, you don't count it. Everything else, if it goes, over your lips, you got to count it. So Other things that can also cause, issues, and this, I can just state it, but, there's videos out there that Dr. Boz and other folks talk about protein. You may end up being like, well, I'm just going to, overeat protein. What we learn on keto is we don't want protein to be, too controlling either, because you will start to, it'll feed into your insulin. So we got to be careful about that. So those are the things that you need to be concerned about whenever you're trying to get a hold of your blood glucose. Now, how do you get it moving in the right direction and stuff like that? You do things like lower your carbs, which we did, and that's why we started to see those good numbers. You do other things like fasting, which we're going to talk about more of in here in just a moment in a separate little segment. And you start adjusting, and doing things like getting your ketones up, because you want your body's fuel source to change. You want it to be, reliant on ketones, not glucose. And that's how we're going to beat it all back down. The thing we want to talk about is some fasting and how that's going to play into, moving the insulin needle and, and some of the other benefits that come with it. But we're going to go at a very light level, because I'm going to call this like the intro fasting discussion. So for you folks who look into fasting and stuff, there's a tremendous amount of like research and data out there that talks about like all the cool things that come with it. If you ever watch Jason Fung, Dr. Barry, Dr. Boz, they'll talk about getting into things called autophagy and and these ratios and GKIs and all this other stuff. For the sake of this discussion, we're going to just talk about just like what can we do now, like as you're starting to dabble with, fasting, what can we do now to see some improvement and start getting those, that needle to move and so forth. So I noticed, with us working together and stuff that, you one day just didn't have a breakfast. Do you remember why that was?
I woke up, I started my day off, and I thought that urge to, that morning hunger just wasn't there. And so I thought, well, I'll just kind of roll with it and see where this goes. And, I was able to get through breakfast. I was always the person that, I was regular at McDonald's.
Oh yeah.
Going through the drive-through every morning, grabbing my morning breakfast, and the idea that I wasn't feeling that hunger pain, I just kind of breezed through breakfast, and it seemed pretty easy to make it to lunch. And then a couple weeks later, after I gotten back from vacation, I was at that point able to breeze through breakfast. And so I thought, well, I just wonder if I could make it till dinner. The first time I started feeling a little lightheaded, little off.
It's different. Yeah, it's different the first couple times you do it.
But it wasn't that, I was, falling asleep or anything like that. And so I just made sure I kept drinking plenty of water and, kind of pushed through it, and I was able to make it. And then after I'd done it a couple times, then it, those type of symptoms, seemed to go away, and I was able to do it then a third or fourth time.
Right. So I noticed on the 1 week that you told me that, hey, I tried a couple 24s, and I noticed that was the week that you had the most significant move on your blood glucose. So the point about mentioning this is that fasting, first of all, is significantly easier when you're on keto. And the reason is that when you're on a glucose-based diet, and Dr. Boz, all these folks will talk about it, but is that if you're glucose, you could do fasting with any diet. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be keto guys, low carb guys, or anything like that. You can do fasting anytime. We know people do it for religious reasons. We know people just do it, whatever, or you have to do it because you got your blood work the next day with the doctor, and so forth. But it's significantly easier because when you're having glucose as your main primary food source, you're hungry every 2 hours. So it's very difficult to fast because you automatically start getting hungry like within an hour or two after, hey, I'm going to fast. That's why we tend to overeat a lot. if you switch to protein, well, protein will be about every 4 hours or so, according to the doctors and so forth. But if you switch to fat as your food source, you stay satiated a lot longer. So it's a lot easier to go longer periods and stuff. So, what you did was, I don't know if the word accidental, because that's what Dr. Boz says, but you kind of had an accidental fast where you're just kind of like, I don't know if it's accidental or just you didn't care. I didn't need to eat. Some people just go and they just forget and they're like, oh, I didn't eat. Wow, I'm surprised I wasn't dying here, because that's the way we used to be. So, once you start doing some level of fasting, and that's what Jamie's experiencing now, you start to see significant improvement in a lot of things. For one, your pocketbook, right, or your wallet, right, because you're not spending as much money. Another one is you start to see better numbers on your blood glucose, and then ultimately it'll even affect your sleep and just about everything that you can. Now, it's best to do different variations of fasting while you're starting out. Like if you're wanting to do like Jamie, you start out with something like a 16-8, which is kind of what he accidentally did that first time, or on purpose, whatever you want to say. Where he skipped breakfast. So he had 16 hours of fasting approximately, and about 8 hours of window of a time to eat, that you could feast. So, and then he went ahead and tried on his own. So we had a little discussion ahead of time where we talked about the semantics of, well, is it, if I only do 22 hours, is that one meal a day, which is OMAD, or is that, more 16-8? And I tell him, just count it as an OMAD. You just, you came off your fast a little early. Like you said, the one day you were at the dive shop, you were planning on going for the 24 hour mark. But you just didn't know when you were going to eat next. So you were like, I better take the opportunity now. Well, you still got 22 hours of fasting, which was fantastic. So his parameters, will change over time, just like mine. My fasts have changed over time based off of what I think I can do at this point. I'm right up against starting a 72-hour fast now, and I hadn't done a 72-hour fast in 3 weeks, but I've done some 48s, in between. So it has to be when it's ready for you. And fasting can be a way that you can really make significant changes. I personally wouldn't do fasting on a glucose-based diet, although I know people who do it. There's a guy on YouTube that does alternate day fasting where he just every other day fasts, but he doesn't say he's a keto guy, so I just assume he's just eating glucose the rest of the time. So it sounds like you like fasting. It's just that, you got to get yourself into a more regular, habit of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything about fasting that you had a question about before we wrap up the fasting discussion here?
No, I think that pretty much, explained it.
Easier than you thought?
Yeah, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't bad. The little bit of dizziness and all of that, but then.
Have you ever done a fast before?
No, this was the first time I'd ever.
Okay. So you do, so I think this, keto, fasting go together. I think that always makes it a lot easier. And, one thing that would benefit you tremendously when you're fasting is make sure that your body's like fat adapted and that you're eating you're used to eating larger amounts of fat. So your macro should be a keto macro. I think that would make it a lot easier. And what I mean by that is 75% of your food should come from fat, 20% from protein, and only 5% comes from carbs. And if your carbs are less than 20, things just kind of push themselves into place. And never, ever, ever, ever count calories. This next segment talks about planning and how it can help you when you get into, I would say, rough situations. For example, like you did in a couple circumstances where, and I've been there before myself, when you're traveling, when you have holidays, when the food options are not what you expect them to be, and then how do you handle that when they're not? So I know that you had an opportunity to go out of the country. You went for about a week, right? Just a little, maybe a day over a week, or maybe it was a full week. And you went to an all-inclusive place. You were still very new to, doing this, keto/low carbness. What did you do to plan ahead of time? I know we had a discussion, that was part of it, but. Do you remember anything you did? Or?
Like I said, there wasn't I wasn't sure, really what to expect or what the meals were going to be when we got there. This was
First time for that.
yeah, the first time going to this particular place and the resort. I've been to resorts and different things before, but I just really wasn't. And so I guess as far as my plan, I thought I was just going to try and hit up, proteins and things that I thought were going to be,
yeah.
along
interesting you mentioned protein. So we had a little discussion on that before too, but it's easy to see because, we think keto, we think, meats, cheeses and things like that, but we really need to think more high fat. But protein is certainly better than, sugar,
yeah.
right? Or, glucose and stuff like that. So, you ended up you also had an ally down there. My brother was with you on your trip, so and he's a keto guy too. So that helped out a lot.
Yeah.
And then I think they had mostly buffet style stuff, right?
Yeah, it was.
So that helps a little because then you can just ignore the pastries and look at the, the stuff that's more in line with that. So then, when you're at home, you obviously have more control, more choice and all that, but now you went on another trip, and this time I would say you were, significantly, more successful. What did you do? I shouldn't say it's a trip, it was travel for work. You already went into it knowing what you were going to do and how you would handle things, right?
Yeah, so planning on going on this, on this business trip, I had decided that for that week I was going to skip the breakfast lunch on Wednesday and Friday. So I had made my decision. That's what I wanted to do for those 2 days. And then for lunch on Thursday, I didn't know what it was going to be till it got there, but as it planned out, the choices were either a hamburger or the little chicken tenders. And so when I got the hamburger, I was excited about the hamburger because I knew I could.
Was it plural? Were you able to get 2 or 3? Or were you only able to get
either
one?
Or. So
oh, okay.
It was an either or, so you could either get a hamburger or you could get the tenders.
You couldn't say I want 2 hamburgers or 3 hamburgers?
No.
Oh, see, I would have been like, slipping 20s to people to
get. The option was there afterwards, but we didn't know if there was going to be.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. You have to wait until everybody's. Yeah. I get that.
So I was able to actually, grab the hamburger. I got some lettuce, and then they had mayonnaise, and so I was able to. I kind of like take the hamburger and put the lettuce on there and the mayonnaise, and then just kind of mix it all up. And
right. So you knew going into it you were going to skip these meals. You also knew when you got there what you were looking for. So you thought, you didn't know what the meals were going to be, but at least when they were presented to you, you knew it. And then I remember something about, that Wednesday you were presented with like 2 food options that weren't going to work, and then you mitigated that by like, I'm not giving in. Instead, you just found another, actually just lucky the guy that was with you, that you roomed with also didn't like the choices. So you guys said, we'll go out afterwards and get what we want and what we need. So sometimes that's what you need to do, when you're planning. I know when I planned for my vacation, which just happens to be like just last week, the wife and I talked and said, these 3 days, we are eating in. Now, we didn't say, I shouldn't say these 3 days. We decided that, 2 days, that we were going to eat out 3 times, eat in 2 times, and that was our thing. And we weren't eating breakfast or lunch ourselves, but the kids, obviously we feed them whatever they want to eat and stuff like that, whenever they want to eat. So we didn't change that. I think it just goes to show that, planning helps. And now that you're so new to keto, you're already coming up on another, time period that you and your wife have, that you're going to be gone 12 days in Hawaii. Tell just real quick some of the planning that you've just done for that.
For myself, I've decided that, I can easily make it through breakfast, so I can just rule that one out, and then, at that point, depending on the activity level or what we're doing for the day, just a light lunch, and then a good meal in the evening for dinner, and then we'd also talked about maybe hitting up one of the local local stores and just buying a few things to have at the hotel so that we can
augment and kind of, fill in the gaps. And also, just for the days you don't want to necessarily eat out, because 12 days eating out every day
it's very expensive.
Can be in Hawaii. I don't even know what it would be. I know we went down to the little store, bought everything, stocked the refrigerator. We had those foods and stuff that we needed and stuff. And it sounds like you've already are way ahead of it, and that's not even for another 3 or 4 weeks, right? So before you do that, so I think you have to plan. And even though you're going to be away, you still got to know that you got to track for yourself and keep these things, because otherwise it doesn't take long. I mean, it can be very easily, plan to track, because if you don't, it just takes one, right? One thing, and then you're just like, oh, I can't believe I just didn't think about that. It takes moments, right? So I think planning is critical to, doing things. And it really doesn't take that much. I mean, you said it all like in 2 sentences, 3 sentences. I mean, it really is just about thinking it out and just, okay. I used to call this like when I would, I used to teach, I would tell students that, planning, for different things requires a different level of planning. For example, if you're going to go on a quick road trip somewhere and the destination is short, not far away, and it's not too uncomfortable, you can probably wing it, right? And that's kind of sometimes what happens to us. But if you got to go like a longer trip, then you got to start thinking about staying at a hotel and all these. So your complexity goes up. The same way with this, 2 days away, not as much planning. 12 days away, you got to have a conversation with somebody else and figure out what to do with the family and so forth. So planning is key. Consistency is key. So I think you're going to do really well, just like you've done before in the past on some of these little things you've had challenges with.
Yeah.
So, all right. Amy and I have talked your ear off, specifically me. I like to talk a lot. What's next for Jamie? Well, Jamie's going into his week 6, starting tomorrow. And what goals does he have? If you remember, goals weeks 1 through 6, all he's had is a carbohydrate goal. Although I've seen him do some fasting on his own, I've seen improvement, other things he's doing and all that. But to get into keto, we need him to be keto, no longer low carb. If you want the keto tattoo, oh wait a minute, I don't have one. If you want to be considered keto, you have to be low carb, high fat. They are not mutually exclusive. Low carb's always been doing, but you'll notice we've seen ketones already, so he's getting that. So what do we need in order to do that? Well, we need him to change his macros. So I see his numbers and stuff. Some days he's got, some higher fat, he has his carbs are dialing in the right range. We see his protein sometimes is a little too high, and that's causing some issues as well. So what we need to do is get him to where he is 70, at least this is our target, 75% fat, is what your food needs to come from, which is counterintuitive what the American Medical Association tells you. 20% or less protein and 5% or less, carbs. So if you can take your fat up as much as you want, what you'll find out is that you'll pretty much, if you do things right, you'll start to trend towards getting around 70 something percent all the time on your fat. And then you do some, what I call macro augmentation, or what do I supplement my meals with. So Jamie and I had a conversation before this. We went through, I reminded him I had a video out there that talks about this, but for me, when I put together something, and this is just a refresher, Jamie, that, try to pick things right off the get-go that have a little bit more fat. If it doesn't have it, then cook it in fat, add the fat. So for me, a lot of times I'll start to put the meal together, and then I'm like, okay, I'm around 70% fat. My carbs are already down low. My protein might be tacking a little high. So then I'm like, okay, I need to add some fat. So that might include, adding pecans, macadamia nuts, or something to add to your meal to shoot it up that doesn't bring up the other numbers super quickly. So we need you to do that. Add butters, add more oils, and if you're doing like the salmon patties I talked about, extra thing of mayonnaise, just to get that up there and stuff. So That's what he needs to do. We need to get those fats up, because the more fat you got coming in, the more you're going to be satiated, the longer you can go, which will make the fasting easier. And it all just start to play off of each other. We talked about, another thing that he has to do. Okay, first of all, so his goals: 75% fat, 5% carbs, 20% protein, roughly around there. I want him to try to, do the best he can to try to pick clean, healthy foods. He's already there. He does that a lot. So I feel like he's in the right range. He's about as much as me or anybody else could do, as far as like, unless you're just buying organic everything, which is just ridiculous. You're not going to get clean everything. So just shoot for clean. And if you have some dirty, like we do with pepperoni or some other, whatever, that's okay. Some level of fasting. I already know you're dabbling in fasting already, but let's stop dabbling and let's turn it into a daily goal. So from week 6 on, at least 16-8 on his fast. That's the minimum to shoot for. If he ends up with a 1 meal a day, I'm cool with that. I'm gonna preface this with, I'm having him do 16-8, not 16-8 advanced, or not 23 OMAD advanced. Advanced being that if he wants to do some kind of fat in the morning in place of breakfast, or if he needs a little push at some point, he can do some MCT oil, maybe some butter, some full fat, doesn't have anything else with it. That you can do for now. If he ends up doing it in advance, that's great. He's going to track it and put it in there for me. We're not splitting hairs over if he does 23 hours versus 26 hours versus 21 hours. Whatever the number that's closest to it, that's what he's going to classify his fast as. So let's think about some of the. He still has the 20 grams or less requirement. There'll be days he might get 22. There might be days he gets 18. There might be days, like I saw in some cases, you had 5s and 4s and 6s and stuff like that. Let me glance at his goals one more time, folks, before I say we're done talking about his goals for the week. And track. Ever since you've been back from vacation, even the week before, you've been tracking like a machine, and love it. We went over some things about that just to make sure, but tracking tells me like verifiably where you're at. That's how I can just look at something and go, what did you have yesterday? Because what I can't see, because him and I have the chronometer app, but I'm not buying the $29.99 subscription so I can see everybody else's. A month. I can't see specifically what he's eating, so he has to tell me, but I can see the macronutrient breakdown of it, and that's how sometimes I can get a little bit better picture. So notice one goal he does not have. What's that one goal?
Weight loss.
Right. That's why everybody's watching, right? They're like, I want to see how much weight you lose on keto. The point of it is, and you said it perfectly, is that if you're doing all this,
the weight loss comes on its own.
Yeah, it comes on its own. It's a byproduct of it. And, it's more important to get the benefits of, getting his ketones up, getting his macros, getting to where he's living off of his fat. Look at me, I'm proof of this. 19 weeks ago, I was, 234.4. And I would just bleed ketones. I'm ketones all the time. We're trying to get his ketones in a much higher rate, and it's proof. We've seen days you fasted, your blood work is looking good. Getting down to the very end of Jamie's time sitting in the studio with me and updating. So we just talked about his goals for week 6 and on. What I wanted to finish one on was just like, what are the next milestones that we see coming? I don't care how insignificant these things are, Jamie. I don't, if it's another I call it little things moment. It's, it could be a big thing. It could be a milestone like weight-wise. Let's start with that one. What is your milestone milestones, I guess I should say, weight-wise? Because you hit the under 300. That's huge.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I think, I'm in the 290s now, so my next goal would be to get to the 280s, just set a goal that's, reachable. I don't want to set one that's too far out, and
Yeah, even though we say weight is not, I think what I mean by weekly weight goals is that, he doesn't have an edict while out of here going like, you have to have 2 pounds off next week or I'm not talking to you anymore. No, it's not like, this is just I will feel, it could be week 6, it could be week 7, it could be week 8, that you hit this, but basically what you're saying is, and I do the same thing, is
that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, like those crossing over into, when you see it go from 2.8 on this 2.80 on the scale and 2.7 and 2.6, you just know it feels good. Mm-hmm. So that's one of them. I know you have something major coming up here. Is it this week coming?
It's this week on Thursday. I've been, waiting on this for 6 months now. I have my doctor's appointment, and I'm, real excited to go in. I'm positive that my A1C is going to look better, and then, I know that my glucose looks a whole lot better, and, I just know from, when my weight was taken in the doctor's office in December to now, my doctor's goal for me was 15, so I
15 pounds?
Yeah, so I more than blew that out of the park.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking forward to, finally getting a little bit of approval from the doctor as opposed to, this is what you need to do.
They were telling you what you were going to have to be on insulin.
Yeah.
If you didn't get your bleep together, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to go on insulin, and then, So that first 5 weeks, you're not even dialed in yet. Yeah. So just imagine when you're dialed in as a full keto person, you're going to blow them away the next time. Just this time it's going to be huge. So that is a great milestone. For you, I know that feels good to you. Like I can go in there and I don't have to be like, like we all do, right? Like 3 days before the visit, we start eating a little better, and all that stuff doesn't work. But, it's like, you get to go in and say, I'm doing this, that, and another. And there could be slight increase in your cholesterol, and, just understand that, just tell them that you're following, you're talking to me, but you're also talking, you're following these doctors online. Dr. Boz will tell you, hey, have the doctor refer to them if they've got any questions or anything like that. The fact is your cholesterol could go up a little to begin with, but over a longer period of time, like I think the doctor said, 1 to 2 years is when you start to see the numbers actually shake out the right way. Let's see, what other milestone moments things do you think you have in front of you besides?
I guess another thing that you don't really think about is that dreaded flight.
Oh yeah.
When I went on this trip, I had an almost 5-hour flight, and the thought of sitting in that airplane, when you got to sit down in the seat and take the armrest up and then suck it all in to be able to squeeze that seatbelt together.
So you're not irritating the people. But I've been heavier before, and you're just like, you're sitting in the seat, right, folks? If I'm sitting in the seat, Jamie and I are sitting beside each other, as a heavy person, you don't want to be rude, especially if you're a nice person, right? You're like, all right, I'll let them have the armrest, or I'll just do this. And then you're trying to sit there for like 3 hours. And you said this happened like in January or some other time you went.
In January when we had, flown to Florida, that was a very uncomfortable flight to Florida. And then on this trip,
you had more room.
I was able to actually button the seatbelt and actually had a little room to tug on it. So that was nice.
You had 9 pounds of your own weight loss, I think. And then you had like another 9 pounds or so. I don't know, you had like quite a bit of weight off just in that short period of time before you went. I'm trying to think. So I think other milestones you have to look forward to is when that blood glucose keeps coming down and it just stays down. Mm-hmm. That is going to be a huge milestone, because right now you'll still tack up. It just something, boom, boom, boom. And sometimes you look at it and you're like, there's no rhyme or reason, why it did that. At some point, you'll be less insulin resistant, and you'll start getting into it, and you'll just be boom. And then there's all the other great things that come with it, that you still benefit with when you're in full keto. That's when you're really going to just absolutely love it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things you'll be excited about. You'll just be like, I am full keto. I see what everybody's talking about. It's like everything just seems to be surreal. You're getting a lot of it now. I don't want to discount and say you're not like having elements of keto. You for sure are, But wait until you just have like all the benefits. You start seeing skin improvement, you know, and just you seem to age, you know, backwards. You know, these things I see in other people that have been doing keto a lot longer than me and so forth. So, any comments or questions about what's ahead of you?
No, I'm just excited for the days to come and to continue on the journey and, you know, make my goal weight loss and ultimately, you know, live a healthy, you know, prosperous life.
Yeah. So this is the part of the video where we get to tell him again that we won't see him in 4 weeks. So Jamie and I are sitting here talking about planning on the next time we update you, right? This is week 5 and we're looking at it, and week 4 just happens to fall right, you know, in the middle of his vacation with his family that they've been planning forever now. It's almost a 2-week thing. So we're going to have to do this again at 5 weeks, and it's going to be right at the tail end. So we might even have to bump it to 6. We'll just see how he feels when it gets closer. No matter what, Jamie and I will be in constant contact. I don't want to make it sound like we're talking like every moment. It's not like that. Some days we don't talk to each other at all. I will be looking at his numbers. He'll be doing his logging. You know, I got my secret spy brother that hangs out with him, so I can kind of, you know, well, I should say diving at least together. That, you know, I can always get a beat on, you know, where he's at, and he always knows he can reach out to me anytime he needs it. I mean, he's asked me, you know, how do you do this? Because you know what? I've been through all this. I've been through the roller coaster before. This time I'm doing it a more regulated thing, and that's what I've been sharing and mentoring with Jamie. So I think you got, I know I'm getting close to my end of my weight loss goal, which will be about 6 weeks from now. You know, when we do, you know, I'm guessing somewhere towards the end of the year, beginning next year, you're going to be there, and, you know, we'll be able to continue to mentor other people, you know, and do the same thing, just kind of share what we're going through.
Yeah, that sounds like exciting stuff.
All right, that's it. I just want to say thanks for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe so you can get updates with Jamie. Remember, the weeks in between, we do these, you know, very short video updates where you can get, you know, just a quick update on how Jamie's doing. And then, you know, he also sends a video that I incorporate into that. And then we'll do a sit down 5 weeks from now. So if you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to leave them down below. Just remember, nobody's perfect. Be a coach, not a critic, and take care, folks.